Welcome to today's live webcast as we launched HLB's inaugural survey of business leaders, the execution challenge of new decade. It's a very interesting time for us as this is a first for HLB. And over the last couple of weeks in 2019, we've been surveying clients and relations of HLB in senior executive positions across 5 continents to understand how in times of a lot of uncertainty and an accelerated speed of change, they are preparing to operate in the new decade. As I said, we surveyed 368 business leaders across 55 countries to understand what concerns them, what excites them, and what their priorities are as they prepare for the future. I am joined today by our panelist, CEO of HLB, Marco Donzelli, Coco, our Chief Regional Officer for Asia Pacific, and Ralph, our industry leader for the real estate group. Thank you for joining me. Marco, if I may start with you, what is overall your outlook on the findings of our survey?
Thank you, Leslie. So I would say that there is one key point which all business leaders, roughly, I would say, all agree on, which is that we are living in very turbulent times, both in economical and political terms. And that actually has an impact on their own business. I think the most interesting piece of information, however, is that while on one side they believe that the economic growth will actually be slower in the next year, at the same time they believe that their own companies, that their own businesses will outperform the global economy. In other terms, they believe that their companies will grow much faster than what is going to happen in the marketplace. And I find it quite ambitious and interesting, to be honest.
Yes, you're right. I believe that the statistics from our survey showed that half of business leaders were expecting economic growth to decline, while 87% of them was confident in their own abilities to grow revenue for their company, correct? Especially considering that the top concern that we've identified through our survey was economic uncertainty. So when we spoke to business leaders about the risk that concerned them in terms of the coming 12 months, it was actually quite a complex factor of concerns. And Coco, do you want to share your thoughts on the things that concern them?
Thank you, Leslie. Yes. So unexpected political developments continue to unfold since our survey closed, and this is unlikely to change in the immediate future. So recently, we've already seen the first black swan of 2020, which is between US and Iran. And also very recently, we've seen China and the US sign the first stage of agreement after nearly 2 years dispute on trade. So 1 in 2 of the business leaders are concerned about the geopolitical uncertainty, and 15% of them stated that they are very concerned. And one of the consequences of this geopolitical uncertainty is the trade flow disruption, which is a worry to 48% of our respondents. So as markets and the trade blocks continue to fragment, it is getting the business leaders are concerned about the future impact of regulatory change, which could increase further. And also because of the same reason, half of them are also concerned about accessing talents, which is required by businesses.
Thank you, Coco. It's very interesting because the factors that you mentioned, it's a quite complex marketplace to navigate with all of the events happening in their microenvironment, right? And one of the questions that we put to our business leaders was how they see the international business environment in times of geopolitical trade and social disruption. And what we found is that they're actually quite optimistic about the opportunities that it represents. Half of respondents saw changes in trade agreements actually create more opportunities, and 40% believes that it creates new investment opportunities, right? So actually maybe some of the confidence that Marco mentioned in his opening, that might actually come from turbulent times creating new opportunities as well. As we're also just entered a new decade, we tested our hypothesis around what kind of business models work in the future. And Ralph, the findings there were quite interesting as well, weren't they?
Yeah, so the business leaders were asked what structure they saw as a winning future business model. And the number one thing they came back with was businesses would be more mobile. Secondly, they saw increasing use of cloud-based technology. Thirdly, they said the workforce would be less rigid, so a much more flexible workforce, and businesses would become less hierarchical. Also, there was also a desire for businesses to become more decentralized, to have more staff participation, which I think we're seeing as a trend now, and also to be resource light. And I think all those things, with the advent of technology, mean that businesses are going to be more nimble and agile and able to adapt to the change that the digital revolution is causing. This is slightly by contrast to the question the business leaders were also asked what actions they were going to be taking as a priority in the next 12 months. So the number one action was to actually achieve internal operational efficiencies. Secondly was cost reduction, and thirdly was new product development. So there is arguably an execution deficit between the sort of near-term actions of business leaders and what they see as their longer-term goals of what a good business will look like in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, perhaps it's quite human in turbulent times to just stand back and see what happens and try to readjust, the business model and how we do business every day, are waiting for new opportunities to come and to grab. However, when this happens, I think there is on one side less risk, of course, but also less return. So the question is, should business leader be more courageous? So, and I think personally that leadership is even more important in these turbulent periods to adapt and to grab those opportunities.
Of course, with more staff involvement, actually, you're going to be bringing the staff with you on those courageous decisions. So you've actually got everyone pulling as a team together.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is going to be very important.
Yeah, interesting. So it sounds like the actions or the areas to strengthen that business leaders are focusing on in the next 12 months are actually quite inward-looking. And it seems that they maybe need to focus more on the capabilities that they need to actually adapt to the new realities of today, right? Marco, if I may turn to you, in terms of the readiness to adapt and the agility of the business leaders that we surveyed, what do you think that they need to do?
I think the first thing is upscaling their own teams, specifically building the right digital capabilities. This is crucial, and this is not just secondary to the other elements. And I think this is recognized by business leaders. Technology is important, as we discussed when you mentioned mobile and so forth, but also in many other ways. Like, for example, it's important to launch new products, to innovate, and to better understand, I would say, your own customers. And I think technology plays a big role within this adaptability. So in regard to technology also, I would add that probably technology, if we asked the same questions a few years ago, probably we would have gotten different answers. And I'm quite surprised that technology now is perceived really as a key component of of the various business models and on the transformation process. So they're not really seen as disruptive forces as such any longer, or at least in principle.
Yes, you're right. I believe.
It's interesting when you look at this is adaptability. It's the ability of businesses to adapt to change and survive, isn't it? And if you look in history, there's been a lot of examples of. I'm thinking Blockbuster Video. Of course, they're selling video. Everything's gone online and digital. So businesses have fallen by the wayside because they haven't adapted. The reaction to I think obviously I'm on real estate. So if you look at the property sector and retail. So retail businesses adapting to online sales. So I mean, there's been some results released recently of some very successful, I think, Boohoo, incredible sales growth, whereas more traditional residential, land-based businesses actually having quite significant declining sales, and obviously they've got very high overheads. So it's the adaptability. It's changing and changing at the right time. The business leaders need to consider.
And that comes back to the characteristics of the successful business models as well, right? Because with adaptability also comes agility. And I believe that one of the findings was that the flexible workforces were a big part of what they saw, right?
Yeah.
And you see
absolutely.
that in your industry, particularly with flex working and shared spaces and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, cloud-based technologies obviously allow you to have employees all around the world, but actually not everyone needs to be an employee. You can have subcontractors and then bring in specialists at the point you need them. They do specific projects, and then you don't carry the full resource going forward. So you only use the resource when you need it. So that's being more agile and having being resource light in terms of the way you're operating.
Yeah. Coco, if I may turn to you. In terms of the way that technology is used to be agile and adapt to change in the market, in our survey we also asked about what business leaders are doing to stay abreast of the rapidly changing consumer behavior. What are your takes on the responses?
Yeah, we all understand it's very important to put the customers at the core of the business. But to our surprise, then only 1/4 of the business leaders are keen to boost customer acumen. And we did ask them how they did it, and we got the answer about the top 3 mechanisms. So like 53% of them were using market research, and 45% of them were using social listening, while 43% are looking and improve the CRM system.
Yeah, so you see an increase in the use of technology for research methods besides just traditional market research, right?
Yes, but the traditional market research is still on top of the list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this is in line with another thing I saw about technology, from the answers. So I did mention that technology is not seen as an enemy anymore, at least in principle, and specifically cloud is seen as an ally. But at the same time, there are technologies that are still seen as a threat, specifically AI, but not only. And when we ask the question, they're all aware of the importance of technology. But when you ask the question, what you're actually doing, what you plan to do in the next year or so, then you actually only notice incremental improvements. So again, you see this potential execution gap between the perception, the ambition, and on the other side, the actions. And so there are a few questions I think, as business leaders should start asking themselves.
Yes, I believe that in our report we found that 49% of respondents think of AI as the most important emerging technology for their business success, but it's also ranked the highest in terms of disruptor to their industry, where interestingly cloud comes second in terms of importance, but is far further down in terms of disruptor for the industry. That's what you meant with new times, disruption from technology is seen as a
yes,
business
again,
as usual now.
It's again risk and return. So in these times, it's easier to just adjust with things that are less of a threat. And of course, cloud is important, and at the same time, I do understand the risks involved with full implementing AI and the relevant costs and so on. At the same time, this is really transforming our ages here. And if you put AI together with other technologies like IoT and blockchain, it is really a completely different world. So we really need to start thinking about this in concrete actions.
Yeah, and we saw as a result as well that the development of digital capabilities within a firm ranked quite high in terms of areas of focus.
Yes, I would say that there are three main questions. Probably business leaders should ask themselves. So first of all, are you actually investing enough in improving the digital capabilities of your teams? Second, are you investing in integrating components, technology components, such as cloud, and not only that, into your business model, with the changes that this implies? And I would say probably the third thing is, are you actually using technology again and data analytics to better study your customer, the customer behavior? So not just using traditional methods, but other more innovative tools which allow you for more precise information. I would say those three are key questions. Of course, there are many others, but if I had to summarize, I would mention these three.
Okay. Earlier, you also spoke a little bit about talent. Where do you think talent comes in terms of the execution gap? Because it relates to all those three questions that you just mentioned, right?
Well, I think that, first of all, having businesses that are more mobile, flexible, decentralized, of course, is normal that they will attract and retain more talent. At the same time, I think that without the right talent, you cannot implement all the other things, because you need to have talent that understand technology. You can buy all the technology that you want, but if you don't have the right talent, then you actually probably create even more confusion and more problems. So those are key things. And I would also add that I was slightly surprised that, for example, climate change was not seen as something that is impacting the economy and
as a concern to business.
Yes, exactly, the businesses. And I think that apart from the clear evidence in terms of profitability and so forth, I would also say that talent look more and more to join organizations which are sustainable. So in turn, if a company doesn't actually have a strategy about that, in the future runs the risk of being penalized, in my view, in the talent marketplace.
Yeah. So I think if we can summarize the findings, there clearly is an execution challenge or performance gap, if we may call it that, between the characteristics that have been identified for business models of the future in terms of their investment in technology, in terms of their talent operating models, and their consumer acumen. But yet, when we asked about what are you focused on in the next 12 months, it seems like they're actually trying to fix their existing models more and have a bit of a risk-averse or hesitant approach to start investing in those capabilities.
So, some link there, I think, would be that if you become a lean business and you review your existing model, make the cost savings you need to make, you then actually have the resources to actually invest in the AI and the cloud-based technologies and the staff that you actually then need. So I think in some ways it's getting your business ready it's a springboard to actually take it forward for the next decade. So,
Yes.
so some of it, cost savings do help.
Yeah.
There are also things, of course, you can do straight away. They're less easy. So, adopting new technologies and taking courageous decisions on new product and new product development and launches is actually a more difficult decision. It's a courageous decision.
I think it's easy to say and more difficult to implement. I think that, however, smart businesses are trying to reason like technology startups, and of course on specific projects they can test things before implementing initiatives at a larger scale. So that's one thing that I would encourage. Start thinking nimble, think agile, think like a startup. Try to test things, of course, because if you are a 10,000 people business, then you cannot really work in the same way, but you can test concepts and then pivot and then change progressively.
Mm-hmm. Coco, from your experience and interpretation of the data, I know you're quite passionate about the consumer acumen part of the research. What would your takeaways be?
Yes, I think as most of the business leaders already recognize the importance of a technology, but only 1/4 of them are ready to allocate resources and efforts in boosting consumer acumen. So clearly, there is a capability gap. Also because it's very important for every business to stay up to date to the latest consumer insights. And this is the key, not only to survive, but also to succeed in the turbulent times of 2020s. So we already talk a lot about technology investment. And I think technology investment is also the answer to bridge the gap of consumer acumen. So as Marco mentioned, several questions for the business leaders to reflect. And I think there are also some questions for the business leaders in regards to this area. So for instance, are you investing in the latest technology, latest techniques in market forecast, in social listening to capture the latest consumer insights so that it can support you to shape your future strategy and innovation? And are you using the feedback? And also, have you designed a dynamic supply chain which is responding and accommodating?
Oh, I thought you were...
No, it's okay.
Thank you, Coco. Yes, it's all about, can you understand the customer that you will be selling to tomorrow in order to maintain relevant, right? Okay, any other thoughts from our other panelists?
No, I think it's...
I think following up on Coco's point, I mean, certainly you can see the businesses that have launched innovative products that have then been a roaring success. You can see they must have done exactly what Coco is suggesting there. They've analysed their market, completed market research, and with the new technologies and with social media, you can get access to information really quite easily that wasn't available previously across the entire globe. So perhaps a product like WeWork, where they've totally changed the way people use space in buildings. They've obviously identified a need, and you've moved away from traditional office space to new office space. So they've assessed the marketplace, and then if they've done that, hopefully they get it right. Contrast with Kodak, who developed the technology and then decided not to launch it. So it's making the right decisions, isn't it?
Yes, and also, as Marco mentioned about the climate change, I think it's also crucial that the consumer behavior is going to change because more and more people are aware of the concerns of climate change. So to understand better about the consumer insights is crucial, especially for business in B2C areas.
Thank you. Marco, any last thoughts?
No, I think it's been quite insightful for us as well, and we have done our own insights analysis, and we learned a lot about what's happening in the world and real perception. So we'll see what happens this year, and I'm pretty sure that as soon as new market opportunities would just arise, then I think there would be a race to just grab them. And the only encouragement is that it is important to start planning and actioning rather than waiting for too long. Unless you don't want to be late at the party. That's what I would say.
Good. Thank you to our panelists for sharing your insight today. I also want to thank all of the business leaders that have taken the time to fill in our survey and respond to our questionnaire. Our report is available now. It's on hlb.global. You can find our key findings and download the full report there. And we would very much like to encourage you reach out to us if any of the issues or the topics that were raised by our panel or in our report are of concern to you. You would like to discuss them in more detail. I think that's it for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lizzie.